Okay, let's try a little thought exercise. I want you to forget, just for a moment, that this is a story about an old warplane. Think of what we're about to go through as a blueprint. Yeah, a detailed schematic that shows you exactly how an entire reality, a core belief held by thousands of the world's best experts, can be taken apart piece by piece and just utterly destroyed. You see, this isn't just about what happened in the skies over Germany 80 years ago. It's about why that same pattern is still playing out today, in corporate boardrooms, on servers, in scientific labs. It's a pattern. And believe me, once you see it, you'll start seeing it everywhere. So, let's dive into this blueprint of defeat.
How is he still with me? That question, that's where this whole thing really begins. The year is 1944, and the voice you're hearing in your head is a German fighter ace. I mean, this guy is a modern knight, a master of aerial combat, one of the best in the world. But his voice, it isn't arrogant. It's thin. It's cracking with this kind of panicked disbelief. See, for miles and miles, deep inside his own airspace, he's been trying everything to shake this new American fighter, and it's like a ghost. It matches every turn, every climb, every dive. It's breaking all the rules of aerial physics as he understands them. So that desperate question, it's not just about some new plane. It's the sound of a man's entire worldview collapsing in real time. It's the very first crack in a fortress everyone thought was invincible.
Now, to really understand that crack, you first have to understand the fortress itself. In late 1943, the German Luftwaffe, they didn't just think they were untouchable over their own homeland, they knew it. To them, this wasn't about arrogance or pride, it was about cold, hard mathematics, a brutal equation written in fuel, distance, and engine performance that all but guaranteed their victory, day in and day out.
What's so fascinating about this quote from General Adolf Galland isn't just the sheer confidence, it's the logic. It's the cold, calculating logic of a predator who knows the exact length of its prey's leash. You see, American escorts like the P-47 Thunderbolt were tough fighters, for sure, but they were incredibly thirsty. They could only fly so far before their fuel gauges screamed at them to turn back, usually right around the German border. And this left the big American bombers, the B-17 Flying Fortresses, all alone for the most dangerous part of their mission. For the Luftwaffe, it was a mathematical certainty. Just wait for the little friends to turn back, and then, as Galland so chillingly puts it, massacre them at our leisure.
And this is what that massacre looked like. 60 B-17 bombers shot down, not in a month, not in a week, but on a single day in October 1943, a day that would become known as Black Thursday. Now, that's not just 60 machines falling from the sky, that's 600 men killed, captured, or wounded in a matter of hours. The loss was so profound, so devastatingly total, that the American High Command was forced to stop all deep bombing raids for months. Galland's math was right. The fortress was holding. By any rational measure, the Luftwaffe had broken the American air campaign. They had won.
But here's the thing about a system that believes it's perfect, that believes it has all the answers. It literally cannot imagine a solution that comes from outside its own logic. So while the Luftwaffe was celebrating its mathematical victory, a completely different kind of math was being calculated, an ocean away. It was a gamble, a hybrid creation, an impossible weapon that wasn't just going to challenge the German equation, it was going to rip it up and set it on fire.
Okay, just look at this timeline for a second, because it reads less like a military development plan and more like some kind of fever dream. It all starts with an American company, North American Aviation, designing a brand new plane for the British in just over 100 days. An amazing airframe, but its American engine was, well, it was asthmatic at high altitude. Then comes this flash of genius, not from some high-level engineer, but from a Rolls-Royce test pilot who suggests a frankly insane idea. Hey, why don't we try putting our high-performance Merlin engine into that sleek American body? And the final, critical piece of the puzzle? A car company in Detroit, Packard, takes one of the most sophisticated, handcrafted engines in the world and figures out how to mass-produce it like a Chevy. Just think about that combo. An American airframe, a British heart, and it's all built with Detroit muscle. It was this international chimera that nobody saw coming.
And this is the crucial point. This was not some lucky accident. Years, literally years before the plane ever saw combat, a military attaché over in London named Thomas Hitchcock, he saw the blueprint. He didn't just see a faster plane. He saw the answer to General Galland's math. He saw an aircraft that could fly all the way to Berlin and back, an aircraft that could tear down the walls of the fortress. He wrote this incredibly prophetic report, arguing that this one machine could single-handedly unlock the entire strategic stalemate in Europe. It was a bet a massive one on a single piece of technology to change the entire course of the war.
And this is the moment the bet pays off. The winter of 1943. This is when the theory of this new plane, the Mustang, collides with the hardened reality of the Luftwaffe. And it's not a gentle collision. It's a shock wave, a cognitive dissonance so profound it would permanently scar the psyche of Germany's greatest pilots. The world they had mastered, the rules they had perfected, they were about to be completely rewritten in fire and smoke.
Just imagine the scene. You're a German pilot. You're climbing to intercept a bomber stream. You pass the usual point in the sky, the invisible line where the American escorts always turn back for home. But this time, they don't. They just stay. These new, slender fighters with the squared-off wings, they just keep coming. That single moment of disbelief, of a fundamental law of your world being violated right in front of your eyes, that's the beginning of the end. The hunters suddenly realize the forest is changed, and they might just be the hunted now.
You know, this isn't just some dry after-action report. This is a confession. Major Ader was a top ace, an expert's expert. His entire combat doctrine was built on the known superiority of his Messerschmitt at high altitude. That was his sanctuary. And now he's being forced to write down the unthinkable, that at 25,000 feet, in his own house, the enemy is now better. It's not just a technical assessment, it's a painful admission that his foundational beliefs about his aircraft, and maybe even his own skills, are suddenly obsolete.
And if Major Eder's report is the intellectual shock, this diary entry from Heinz Knoke is the emotional gut punch. See, for years, the air war was something German pilots flew to. It was fought over Britain, over the English Channel. They were professionals, almost like they were commuting to a very violent office. But the incredible range of the Mustang erased that distance. Suddenly, the dogfights were happening over their own towns, their own homes. That psychological shield of fighting a war somewhere else was just gone, forever. As Knoke writes, the war was now, quite literally, on their doorstep.
And then came the final public execution of a myth. P-51 Mustangs over Berlin. This was so much more than a raid. It was a message sent to the entire German nation. For years, the Nazi regime had promised the German people that no enemy plane would ever reach the capital. And now, here they were, flashing silver in the broad daylight for everyone to see. Every single civilian looking up from the streets of Berlin understood in that moment. The promise was a lie, the fortress had been breached. The myth of the invincible Luftwaffe died that day, not in some secret report, but in the open sky for millions to witness.
But here's the thing. As dramatic and incredible as those dogfights were, they weren't the real story. The P-51 was the catalyst, the spark, but the true weapon that destroyed the Luftwaffe was much colder, much more impersonal. It was a war fought on spreadsheets and assembly lines. It was a systemic collapse, brought about by a relentless, grinding war of numbers that the German system was simply not built to fight.
I mean, just pause and look at this comparison for a second. An American pilot showing up in England for his first tour had over 400 hours of flight training. He was a postgraduate of aerial combat before he even saw an enemy plane. By 1945, because of crippling fuel shortages and desperate losses, Germany was sending new pilots into combat with maybe 80 hours. They weren't just inexperienced, they were sacrifices. One system was creating professionals, the other was feeding its own children into a machine that it knew would kill them.
And this chart right here, it brilliantly illustrates the inevitable result. Look at the speed of this collapse. The Luftwaffe doesn't just decline, it evaporates. The Mustangs created this vicious, inescapable death spiral. They'd shoot down experienced German aces who would then be replaced by those 80-hour trainees who, of course, would then be shot down even more easily, which just accelerated the losses even more. It was a system literally chewing itself to pieces under a pressure it was never designed to bear.
And here it is, the final brutal number in this whole equation, 15,586. That's how many P-51 Mustangs were built. Remember that German pilot's panicked question from the very beginning, how is he still with me? Well, this number is the answer. He's still there because behind that one plane is an industrial ocean, a system that can produce and ship and fuel and arm thousands upon thousands more just like him. It's an answer that has nothing to do with tactics or bravery and everything to do with overwhelming industrial might.
This quote from Johannes Steinhoff, it's just the sound of a leader watching his entire system fail in the most heartbreaking way possible. He wasn't just losing a war against the Americans and the British, he was losing a war against his own side's inability to supply him with men instead of, in his own gut-wrenching words, children. He absolutely knew he was sending them to their deaths. This is the real human cost of a systemic failure. This is the tragic endpoint of a flawed blueprint.
Which brings us to the ultimate point, the real takeaway from this entire blueprint. The P-51 Mustang, for all its grace and lethal power, was not the weapon that won the air war. It was just the tip of the spear. The true weapon, the one the Luftwaffe never saw coming and could never ever hope to match, was the system that conceived it, built it, delivered it, and crewed it. You see, they were brilliant at fighting a battle of airplanes, but they were annihilated because the Americans were fighting a completely different kind of war.
So here's the formula. This is the blueprint of victory. It wasn't just about building a better plane. It was about the ability to build one every 90 minutes. It was about the vast training enterprise that churned out thousands of expert pilots. And maybe, just maybe, most importantly, it was the logistical genius of projecting all that power, the fuel, the ammo, the parts, the people, across a 3,000-mile ocean. Germany wasn't just defeated by a plane. It was defeated by a spreadsheet, a training syllabus, and a supply manifest.
And there is no better final word on this than from one of Germany's greatest pilots of all time, Günther Rau. It's the ultimate admission. Rau was a master of the dogfight, a true artist of individual combat. And here he is, after the war, finally recognizing that his individual artistry, his skill, at the end of the day, it didn't really matter. He finally understood that while he was focused on winning the duel, the Americans were focused on overwhelming the entire ecosystem he lived in. They weren't just outfought, they were fundamentally outthought.
So that's the blueprint. And it leaves us with this one final question. Because this story, it isn't really about the past. It's about a fundamental truth of competition. Victory, more often than not, doesn't go to the person with the flashiest new tool or the single brilliant idea. It goes to the one with the superior underlying system of production, of training, of support. So as you look around today at business, at technology, at the great challenges of our time, ask yourself, where is this exact same story happening right now? What victory is quietly being won, not with a silver bullet, but with a better blueprint?